This is my 303 project. Now we're going to talk about child abuse and neglect. Child abuse is when a child gets physically harmed, mentally or emotionally injured, sexually, molestation, or exploitation. Neglect is when a child's parent or guardian fails to provide care for them. So some of our students could be getting abused or neglected. As teachers, it is very important that we pay attention to our students because of that. And then as teachers, we are the mandated reporter. So this means that we must report when we notice that a child is getting abused or neglected. So the protections for school personnel regarding child abuse and neglect. School personnel of child abuse and neglect are protected from lawsuits. Every state provides immunity by law for civil suit and criminal prosecution. Immunity applies to all mandatory reports who act in good faith. In many states, good faith is presumed. So this means that someone can sue the reporter if they can prove that the reporter acted in bad faith. So it talks about in many states, good faith is presumed. So now we're going to talk about legal obligation, the legal obligations of school personnel as it pertains to child abuse and neglect. School personnel must supervise students at school. School officials must report if they notice any kind of abuse or neglect happening to a student. All states require this. School personnel can be held liable if they fail to not report, and you must report if you suspect a child being abused or neglected. I say that because some of our students can be getting abused or neglected. Teachers and staff members must pay attention to our students for that reason. If a teacher reports a child and proves to be unfounded, the teacher is entitled to immunity from liability as long as the report was made in good faith. And then these are some of the crisis management plans. There's 11 of them, and they are severe weather, fire, bomb threats or discovery of suspicious items, structural failure, the failure of utilities or loss of utility service, bus accidents, the release of hazardous materials, both indoors and outdoors, the presence of an intruder, use of weapon or taking a hostage, public health or medical emergencies, earthquakes, and nuclear power plant accidents. And there are 5 required safety drills in Illinois, and they are fire drills, which are 3 every year, a bomb evacuation drill, a bus evacuation drill, law enforcement drill, and then severe weather drill. So now knowing what to do, so now we're going to talk about an educator's role for a crisis management plan and safety drills, and what is really important for an educator to know what to do for all the safety drills and crisis management plans. I think it's important to have a chart in the classroom on where to go for certain drills and crises. Following safety procedures. I say this because a teacher shouldn't run in the hallways during a drill, and they should go to the location that they are told to go to. Another important role for an educator to do would be being prepared and also staying calm in front of the class. I say being calm is really important because if a teacher is not calm and is panicking, that can make the students to be scared. And then another thing I think is important is to have a list of your students' medical conditions and have their emergency contact information. I believe it's extremely important to know your students' medical conditions. So, for example, if a student has a kid that has seizures, this teacher can have pillows and blankets in their classroom. The pillows and blankets can be used to put under the student's head that is seizing so that they do not hurt their head. So while I would do that, I would have a student go get a nurse and another one go get another teacher while this is going on. Also, a student, if they have like allergic reaction at school, a nurse can give them an EpiPen. The contact information would be to these students parents and guardians. So if something goes wrong, we can contact the parents and let them know what's going on so they can come to the school or tell us what we need to do next. And then the last thing I think is important for an educator is to have plans for a substitute. And I say that because a substitute should know what to do when a crisis happens. So my first component that I chose is teachers' personal life. I chose this because teachers have a life outside of school. In my opinion, I think that teachers' personal behavior away from school is his or her own business and should be protected by their right to privacy. Say that because your students and colleagues do not have to know what you're doing 24/7. Teachers should be able to have a life outside of school. If a teacher does something illegal, then I believe that the school should then get involved to solve the problem. If a teacher is doing a good job at school, then I believe that others should not try to get involved in the teacher's personal business. And then how does this relate to me? It's because I also have a life outside of teaching. I absolutely enjoy teaching in the classroom and love to be around the students. When myself and my colleagues are not at school, others do not need to roam around in our privacy. So a scenario for this is, can a teacher be fired or suspended for getting a DUI? Well, yes. A teacher could permanently lose his or her job with the school system. When a teacher receives a DUI, I believe that is when school should get involved in a teacher's life because drinking and driving is dangerous. My second legal component I chose is religion. Religion plays a huge role in people's lives, and that's why it's important for teachers to know what to say and do that involves religion. Public schools should not favor a religion or all religions, nor be hostile towards religion. Students can pray at school, but it must be student-led, which means teachers should not be the ones to start prayer or do that. Some schools may be stricter than others about wearing religious jewelry or clothing. Some schools could find that to be disruptive. I think that a teacher should ask the school before wearing religious clothing so that they do not have to change during the day. This component relates to me as an educator because I need to be aware of these religious rules before teaching. It's very important for educators to follow the rules so that they do not offend students and other staff members. And a scenario I came up with is before school, there are some students that are gathering around the flagpole. A teacher tells all students to grab hands and listen to him as he prays. Is that all right? This is not all right because the teacher was leading the students in prayer. It is okay for students to pray at school as long as it is a student-led prayer. So now we're going to talk about academic language, but we're going to first talk about function. Function is a part of the academic language, the purpose for which language is being used, and some of these examples in a lesson plan are analyze, explain, and compare. These action verbs are a part of the learning objectives for a lesson. Now we're going to talk about vocabulary. There are 3 sections of vocabulary in a lesson plan, and they are Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Some ways to introduce vocabulary in the classroom can be putting up posters and having a word wall. Now we're gonna, oh my god. So this is my 303 project. We're going to talk about child abuse and neglect. Child abuse is when a child gets physically harmed, mentally or emotionally injured, sexually molestation. Neglect is when a child's parent or guardian fails to provide care for them. Some of our students could be getting abused or neglected, so that's why it's very important for us teachers to pay attention to our students because of that. School officials, we are the mandated reporter, which means we must report when we notice that a child is getting abused or neglected. The protections for school personnel regarding child abuse and neglect. School personnel of child abuse and neglect are protected from lawsuits. Every state provides immunity by law for civil suit and criminal prosecution. Immunity is mandatory for permissionable reporters, so that's good faith, and in many states good faith is presumed. This means that someone can sue the reporter if they can prove that the reporter acted in bad faith. Now we're going to talk about legal obligation, the legal obligations of school personnel as it pertains to child abuse and neglect. School personnel must supervise students at school. School officials must report if they notice any kind of abuse, neglect happening to a student. All states require this. School personnel can be held liable if they fail to not report. And as teachers, we need to report if we suspect a child getting abused or neglected. If a teacher reports a child and thinks they're getting abused or neglected, and then their report proves to be unfounded, the teacher is entitled to immunity from liability as long as their report was made in good faith. These are the 11 mandated responses of a crisis management plan in Illinois. And then these are the 5 required safety drills in Illinois, which are fire drill, 3 every year, bomb evacuation drill, bus evacuation drill, law enforcement drill, and severe weather drill. Now we're going to talk about an educator's role in these crisis management plans and safety drills. What's really important is for teachers to know what to do during these drills and crisis management plans. I think it's important for a teacher to have a chart in the classroom, knowing where to go during these times. It's very important to follow procedures because a teacher should not be running in the hallway during a drill or crisis, and they need to go to the location they are told to go and not go somewhere else. It's very important to be prepared as well as staying calm from the classroom. I think being calm is very important because if a teacher is not calm and panicking, that can make the students to be scared. Also important to have a list of students' medical conditions and their emergency contact information. So if something goes wrong in school, a kid has a seizure or allergic reaction, we can hurry up and contact the parents so they can come to the school or tell us what we need to do. So I believe that's very important. And then also having plans for a substitute teacher. So if the teacher isn't there, then the sub will know what to do. If a crisis or a safety drill happens, they'll just read off the sub plans. I chose a teacher's personal life as one of my legal components because we all have a life outside of school. I think that a teacher's behavior away from school is their own business. I say that because students and colleagues do not need to know what a teacher is doing 24/7. I believe that if a teacher does something illegal, then that's when the school can get involved. If a teacher is doing good at school, then I believe that others do not need to be involved in their business. This relates to me because I as well have a life outside of teaching. I absolutely enjoy teaching in the classroom and love to be around students. When myself and my colleagues are outside of school, others do not need to roam around in our privacy. A scenario for this, can a teacher be fired or suspended for getting a DUI? Yes. Teacher could permanently lose his or her job with the school system. When a teacher receives a DUI, I believe that's when the school should get involved in the teacher's life because drinking and driving is absolutely dangerous. My second component I chose is religion. Religion plays a huge role in people's lives, and that's why it's important for teachers to know what to say at school when it involves religion. Public schools should not favor a certain kind of religion or be hostile towards religion. Students can pray at school as long as it's student led, so that means teachers cannot lead prayer. Some schools can be stricter than others about wearing religious jewelry or clothing because some people may think that to be disruptive. So I think if a teacher wants to wear that, they should talk to the school staff or the principal before wearing that so they don't have to end up changing during the day. This relates to me as an educator because I need to be aware of these religious rules before teaching. It's very important for educators to follow the rules so they do not offend students and other staff members. A scenario I came up with is before school, there are some students that are gathering around the flagpole. Teacher tells all students to grab hands and listen to him as he prays. Is that all right? This is not all right because the teacher was leading the prayer. It's only okay for students to pray at school as long as it's a student-led prayer. So now we're going to talk about function, which is a part of the academic language, its purpose of which language is being used. Analyze, explain, compare are some examples of function. These action verbs are a part of the learning objectives for a lesson. Now we're going to talk about vocabulary. There are 3 sections of vocabulary in a lesson plan, and they are Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And posters and word wall are some ways to introduce vocabulary in the classroom. Syntax is another part of the academic language. It is specific ways to organize language in order to convey meaning. Some ways to help students with this can be using transition phrases and sentences and have students to practice their writing. Discourse, this is where students will write, talk, and participate in construction using the structures of written and oral language. Construct arguments, oral explanations are some ways students can do this. The importance of academic language, it's very important, and if students have a really good understanding of academic language, then that can help them to end up being more successful in a language. And once students are having good understanding, the teacher can then introduce the class to new vocabulary words. Reading, listening, oral discussions can help improve students with their knowledge. And this is some research to back up what I said about the importance of academic language. This is an example from one of my lesson plans about over claims that I did in the 5th grade classroom. Function was determine the vocabulary, syntax, and discourse. Assessment planning, It's very important for teachers to plan their lesson. When planning a lesson, teachers need to produce an objective for the lesson. And then instruction. Teachers base their instruction over what the students will be assessed over. Teachers make decisions about how to deliver or modify any given lesson based on assessment that the teacher continually collects and reviews. Now we're going to talk about feedback. I believe it's very important to give, for teachers to give feedback to students during a lesson. So some examples to this can be telling them that they did a good job, that was a great response, that was a really good guess, and then explain why the correct answer is correct. So by doing that, it can make the students to feel better about themselves and still build their confidence and not bring them down. And then this is an example of the learning process. I use this from one of my lesson plans that I did over claims. The I do, we do, you do, and you do alone section. And then this was my research theory to back up what I said before. And then that's it.